How prison gangs form inside mega prisons. The first blood. Before we begin, understand this: the walls don't create monsters. They organize them. If you think you know how prison gangs are born, you don't. Subscribe, stay close, and don't blink. Because inside these walls, loyalty is built in blood. The body was found at 5:42 a.m., face down beside a row of stainless steel shower drains in Unit 7 of Blackamore Federal Penitentiary. Steam still clung to the tiled ceiling. Water ran in thin streams across the floor, swirling pink before disappearing into the grates. Inmate Luis Ortega, age 26, had arrived at Blackamore only 12 days earlier. Now he was dead. Correctional officers had already locked down the entire unit by the time Special Investigator Rachel Monroe stepped inside. The heavy steel door sealed behind her with a hollow clang that echoed longer than it should have. Blackamore wasn't just a prison. It was a mega facility housing over 3,500 inmates, divided interracially and regionally aligned housing units, though officially, the administration claimed assignments were random. Ortega had no documented gang affiliation, no prior violent record. Just a low-level drug trafficking sentence out of Phoenix. So why him? She asked quietly. Warden Gregory Shaw stood nearby, arms crossed. Wrong place, wrong Tom. Rachel didn't look up. There's no such thing as wrong place in here. That's not a random assault, she said. That's discipline. Captain Marcus Reed, head of security, exhaled slowly. We swept the unit. No weapon found. Rachel studied the rows of cells lining the upper tier. Faces stared down through bars, silent, expressionless. Inside mega prisons, violence rarely erupted without reason. It was courtesy, message strategy. Who runs Unit 7? She asked. Reed hesitated for a fraction of a second. There are no gangs in Blackamore. Rachel finally looked at him. That's not what I asked. He shifted his weight. The Iron Circle controls most of this block. The Iron Circle wasn't on any official registry. No patches. No public symbols. But they were known inside federal facilities across 3 states. An organized inmate network tied to protection rackets, contraband flow, and internal enforcement. How long has Ortega been assigned to this unit? Rachel asked. 12 days, Reed repeated. Was he approached? Silence. Rachel stood and looked toward the upper tier again. A tall inmate leaned casually against his bars, watching her with unsettling calm. Serving 25 years for racketeering and conspiracy. Unofficial leader of the Iron Circle, Rachel recognized the quiet authority in his posture, the way other inmates subtly avoided standing too close to his cell. She turned back to the body. Ortega refused something, she said. Warden Shaw frowned. You're speculating. I'm reading the room. An officer approached hurriedly. Ma'am, we found something. They escorted her to Ortega's cell. The mattress had been flipped. Inside the hollow metal frame, tucked beneath the lining, was a folded sheet of paper. Rachel pulled on gloves and opened it. 3 words written in block letters: choose or bleed. No signature. No symbol, but a choice had clearly been made. Back in the administrative wing, Rachel requested Ortega's intake file. She scanned his transfer records, disciplinary notes, visitor logs. On day 7, he'd reported harassment but refused to name individuals. By day 12, he was dead. Captain Reed leaned against the desk. Inmates align for protection. That's how it works. You join a group, you survive. You stay alone, you're vulnerable. So this is recruitment? Rachel asked. It's survival, Reed replied. Rachel closed the file. Survival doesn't require murder. Later that afternoon, she sat across from Dante Russo in a secured interview room. A camera recorded silently in the corner. Russo's wrists were cuffed to the table, but his posture remained relaxed. Luis Ortega, Rachel began. Did you know him? Russo tilted his head slightly. New kid from Arizona. He was in your unit. Everyone's in someone's unit, Russo replied calmly. Rachel slid the folded note across the table. Recognize this? Russo glanced at it without touching it. A faint smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. Looks like advice, he said. Advice, in here, you pick a side. Or the sides pick you. Did Ortega refuse to join the Iron Circle? Russo's eyes flicked up, sharp, controlled. You're assuming there's something to join. I'm assuming someone gave him a choice. Russo leaned forward slightly, chains clinking softly. You ever drop a goldfish into a tank full of sharks, investigator? Rachel didn't respond. He lasted 12 days, Russo continued. That's longer than most. You're saying you didn't order it. I'm saying, Russo replied, voice lowering, you're looking at the wrong level. Rachel studied him carefully. Explain. Russo leaned back again. Gangs don't start in prison. She felt the weight of that sentence. They evolve, he continued. Administration groups a spy region. By language, by past affiliations, you pack men into boxes, limit resources, and then act surprised when they organize. You're blaming the system, Rachel said. I'm describing it. She held his gaze. Who enforces the rules? Russo's smile faded. Depends who's watching. Hours later, Rachel reviewed surveillance footage from the shower block. Cameras captured inmates entering and exiting in controlled intervals. At 5:39 a.m., Ortega entered alone. At 5:40, another inmate followed. The camera angle didn't show the interior stalls, just shadows moving behind fog glass. At 5:42, the second inmate exited. Rachel froze the frame. The man walking out wasn't masked. He wasn't rushing. It wasn't Dan Russo. It was Correctional Officer Brian Keller. Assigned to Unit 7 for 6 years, standing in uniform, calm. Rachel's pulse quickened. Zoom in, she instructed. The footage sharpened. Keller adjusted his gloves as he stepped out of the shower area and slipped something small into his pocket. Rachel leaned back slowly. Because if a correctional officer was walking into inmate-only areas during the exact minute of a gang-style execution, then this wasn't just about how prison gangs form. It was about who was helping them form. And when Internal Affairs was notified, a second body was discovered before sunset, this one in an empty maintenance corridor. Correctional Officer Brian Keller, dead, and pinned to his uniform with a sharpened toothbrush was another note. No loose ends. Rachel stared at the message, her mind racing, because now the question wasn't just who killed Ortega. It was who was powerful enough inside Blackamore to silence a correctional officer within hours. And when they pulled Keller's phone records, one outgoing call stood out, placed at 5:31 a.m. 11 minutes before Ortega entered the showers. The number didn't belong to an inmate. It belonged to someone in the prison's administrative wing, someone with clearance, someone who wasn't supposed to be involved at all. When Rachel saw the name attached to that number, her breath caught. Because it wasn't Dan Russo, it wasn't Captain Reed, it was Warden Gregory Shaw. And that changed everything. The lockdown began at 3:17 a.m. Steel doors slammed shut in synchronized thunder, echoing through every tier of Blackridge Federal Penitentiary. Red emergency lights washed the concrete corridors in a dull, pulsing glow. Officers in tactical gear stormed cell block D where Marcus Hale had been found hours earlier, his body discovered during routine count, crumpled beside his bunk. Warden Eleanor Vance stood in the control room above it all, arms folded tightly across her chest. The screens in front of her flickered between camera feeds, grainy images of inmates being forced to kneel, hands laced behind their heads. Full sweep, she ordered. No exceptions, but sweeps inside mega prisons were never simple. Blackridge held nearly 3,800 inmates. Within its walls, alliances weren't casual, they were survival, and now survival had shifted. Detective Adrian Cole arrived before sunrise, escorted through metal gates and biometric scanners. He walked past rows of razor wire glinting beneath the pale morning light. Inside, the air felt heavier than before, charged, suspicious. Warden Vance met him outside the control center. This wasn't random, she said quietly. Marcus Hale had protection. Cole nodded. Protection doesn't mean immunity. They reviewed surveillance footage from the hours before Holly's death. On screen, Marcus sat alone in the common area, flipping through a worn paperback. Around him, members of the Iron Brotherhood lingered casually, then something odd. At 9:40 p.m., the camera feed from Tier D4 glitched for exactly 90 seconds. When the image returned, Marcus Hale was no longer in view. Cole leaned closer to the monitor. That's not a random glitch. Vance's jaw tightened. We had maintenance check the system last week. No issues reported. Cole replayed the footage twice more. The glitch wasn't static interference. It was a deliberate blackout. Someone inside Blackridge had created a blind spot. Meanwhile, in segregation, Isaiah King sat on the edge of his steel cot, staring at the wall. Word traveled fast inside mega prisons. Even without phones, even without freedom, information flowed like water through cracks. Marcus Hale had been a shot caller for the Iron Brotherhood. His death meant one thing: power vacuum. And power vacuums inside mega prisons were never peaceful. By midday, tension rippled through every yard and corridor. Members of rival factions eyed each other carefully. Meals were eaten in silence. Conversations were whispered. Cole began interviewing correctional officers assigned to Tier D that night. Officer Daniel Ruiz looked exhausted. Hale wasn't worried, Ruiz said. If anything, he seemed relaxed. Did he receive visitors? Cole asked. None that were logged. That word lingered. Logged. Blackridge operated on documentation, every movement, every interaction. But mega prisons were too massive for perfection. In the gaps between paperwork and patrols, prison gangs thrived. Cole requested Hawley's visitor records again. One name appeared 3 times in the past month. Isaiah King, the same Isaiah King currently sitting in segregation. Cole studied the file. Officially, King and Hale were listed as adversaries. Rival affiliations, opposing groups, but prison politics were rarely what they seemed on paper. In the interrogation room, separated by reinforced glass, Cole faced Isaiah King. You and Marcus Hale met 3 times this month, Cole began. Isaiah's eyes were steady. People talk. About what? About survival. Cole slid a photograph across the table, the screenshot of the 90-second camera blackout. You know what this is? Isaiah didn't look down. Looks like broken equipment. Cole leaned forward. It's opportunity. Silence stretched between them. Marcus Hale was building something, Cole said carefully. Something bigger than the Iron Brotherhood. A flicker passed across Isaiah's face, barely noticeable, but there. Mega prisons create pressure, Cole continued. Pressure makes alliances, strange ones. Isaiah finally spoke. You don't understand this place, then help me. Isaiah exhaled slowly. Hale wanted unity. Cole blinked. Unity? He was tired of endless turf wars. Said the gangs were bleeding each other dry while the system stayed untouched. That wasn't the narrative administration believed. Hale was meeting with leaders from 3 major factions, Isaiah said quietly, including mine. Cole felt the shift in gravity. He wanted to form a council, Isaiah added. Shared power. Shared control. Inside a facility holding thousands of inmates, such a coalition would be unprecedented. And who opposed that idea? Cole asked. Isaiah's silence answered the question before his words did. People who benefit from chaos. Back in the control room, Cole pieced the puzzle together. If Hale was attempting to unify rival gangs, his death wasn't random retaliation, it was sabotage. Someone inside Blackridge needed division. Warden Vance joined him again, tension visible in her posture. We found something, she said. Maintenance logs showed a manual override on the camera system during the exact 90-second blackout. The override code required administrative-level access. Cole stared at the screen. That narrows the list. Only 7 staff members possess clearance high enough to manually disable surveillance. 7 people inside a facility that prided itself on control. Later that evening, another incident erupted. A fight broke out in the yard between members of 2 rival factions. It lasted less than a minute before officers intervened, but it was enough. The fragile balance was cracking. Cole watched the chaos unfold from behind reinforced glass. Someone's accelerating this, he murmured. If Hawley's vision of unity died with him, old rivalries would ignite full-scale conflict. And in mega prisons, conflict meant lockdowns, injuries, and sometimes more bodies. Back in segregation, Isaiah King received a folded piece of paper slid beneath his door. No name, no signature, just 4 words, you were never included. Isaiah's expression hardened. The message confirmed what he feared. Hale hadn't been acting alone. And not everyone had been invited to his so-called council. Cole's phone rang just after midnight. It was Ruiz. You need to get down here, the officer said urgently. We found something in Hawley's cell. Inside the small concrete room, officers had dismantled the bunk frame during a deeper search. Hidden inside the hollow metal support was a tightly sealed plastic packet. Cole carefully opened it. Inside were handwritten notes, pages of names, representatives from multiple gangs, dates of secret meetings, and one final page that made Cole's pulse quicken. At the top was a list labeled, "Confirmed." Below it were 6 inmate names, and beneath them, one staff member. Cole read the name twice, disbelief settling into clarity. The camera blackout hadn't been random. The sabotage hadn't come from the outside. Someone on the inside had helped orchestrate Marcus Holloway's murder. And if that staff member was working with a faction determined to stop unity, then Holloway's death was only the beginning. As alarms suddenly blared across Blackridge once more, Cole realized something chilling. This wasn't just about how prison gangs formed. It was about how deeply they could infiltrate the very system designed to contain them. And somewhere inside the prison walls, the person who betrayed Marcus Hale was already planning the next move. Ever wondered what happens when the justice system itself becomes a crime scene? Tonight, we're diving deep behind prison walls, into a story that's more than just a simple whodunit. It all starts with a single death, an inmate found lifeless in his cell. On the surface, it looks like just another tragic, but unfortunately common, incident in a maximum security prison. The case is assigned to Detective Miller, a seasoned investigator known for seeing things others miss. Initially, the prison administration is cooperative, but Miller quickly senses something is off. The official story is a gang dispute gone wrong. The evidence seems to point that way, almost too neatly. There are whispers among the inmates, a palpable tension in the air that has nothing to do with the usual prison rivalries. The guards are tight-lipped, their eyes darting nervously whenever Miller asks a question that veers off the official script. He knows he's being led down a carefully constructed path, and he's determined to find out where it's really supposed to lead. Miller decides to focus on the victim. He wasn't a high-ranking gang member. He was a quiet man, just a few months away from parole. Why would he be the target of a violent hit? Digging into his records, Miller finds a pattern. The victim had filed multiple grievances, all of them about seemingly random fights and escalating tensions in his cell block. He claimed these conflicts were being intentionally stirred up. His grievances were dismissed every single time. This is where the story takes a dark turn. Following this thread, Miller uncovers a chilling scheme. He finds evidence that certain prison officials are profiting from the chaos. By secretly instigating and managing conflicts between different groups of inmates, they've created a black market. They control the flow of contraband, offering protection and illicit goods to the highest bidders. The more chaos, the more fear, the more demand for their services. It's a business model built on human suffering, turning the prison into a private enterprise where the currency is violence and desperation. The murdered inmate had figured it out. He was getting too close to exposing the entire operation, collecting evidence to send to outside authorities. He wasn't killed in a random act of violence, he was silenced. He was a liability to a multi-million-dollar conspiracy orchestrated by the very people meant to uphold the law within those walls. Now, Miller is in a race against time. He's inside a fortress controlled by the people he's investigating. Every conversation could be a trap, every friendly face could be a mask. He has the truth, but getting it out of the prison and bringing the powerful men behind the scheme to justice will be the most dangerous challenge of his career. This isn't just about solving one murder anymore. It's about dismantling a corrupt system from the inside out before more lives are lost. Thanks for watching. If you found this story compelling, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next deep dive. See you next time.